Good evening, everyone. Welcome to episode number 68 of Restitching the Tapestry.
Sorry, I was just making the drink.
Oh, I heard something in the background and I was like,
Yes.
what's going on? Well, it's good to see all of you this week. It's been a very, very long week. There's been a lot of stuff going on. And as you can imagine, based on the show's title, we're going to be talking about quite a few things tonight. Okay. But of course, before we get into talking about our topic, let's talk about what we've been up to and how we've been doing. Oh, I hear some click. I hear some clicking in the background. Oh, there we go.
That was me. I put my phone near my computer.
Oh.
Sorry, I was just excited. I was just messaging Panda, who's not in the chat yet, or at least I don't see him. Our friend Ken is in the chat, and I'm super excited.
Hello, Ken.
Yeah.
Arby and Leo are here too. Hello.
Anyway, so you asked how we're doing. I'm fine. I am having one of those weeks where I've just not been on the ball. Like these two poor souls got to hear me like clearing my throat and saying red leather, yellow leather, trying to warm my voice up so I can be ready for the podcast. So I am just not on the stick this week, and I apologize, but I'm here.
But see, I feel like you're one of those people, like if you didn't say anything, we would have assumed that you had everything together, because I'm also one of those people where if I don't say anything, I'm pretty good at passing that I have everything together, you know? Usually. At least I think. Ari, how about you?
I definitely said today in our YouTube chat that we have that I was thinking about not showing up. It's like sometimes I just get like that, and then I come here and I'm like, oh right, I'm really glad I came out. But like there was that 1 week for autism awareness that I missed that episode, and I was just like, dang it was such a good topic.
Well, and I think part of also like the fact that because we've had so many difficult things happening over the past day and a half, that it almost seems like a mountainous cliff to scale in order to even talk about, right? Like it sounds just like a very imposing topic. So
yeah,
but we'll get through it. I think these are definitely two topics that need to be discussed, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
and the other thing that happened is this morning at about midnight, I got this like burst of motivation and cleaned my whole apartment, like top to bottom, just scrubbed down everything. And I was like, is this mania or is this just me being motivated? I don't know. All I know is that my apartment is now clean.
Mania or motivation. That almost sounds like a series title.
Anytime you want to come here and get out some of that mania, I got you.
You're way more committed than I am. My house is a mess right now, especially my office. It's terrible. For me, my week has been going pretty well. It's been, busy, but not, too drastically busy. I've actually made a little bit of time to be creative here and there, which I appreciate. I got a new phone, which you probably saw in one of my prior videos, and I've been loving it. I'm super obsessed with it, and I'm going to be doing a lot of vlogging using this camera because it has such high quality. So I'm super excited. Mm-hmm. So before we get on to going over the show's mission statement, let's see what everybody is saying. So Leo has great news. I treated myself to not one, but 3 different tarot decks. That's exciting. One can never have enough of those, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Right? Panda is here. Hello, Panda. It's good to see you. Sophia is here.
Hi,
hello, Sophia. And Kenneth just got done watching episode number 67. Thank you so much, Kenneth, for going back and watching our prior episodes. We really appreciate it.
That's the toxic masculinity episode, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Part 1. Yeah.
We originally were going to do that part 2 tonight, but because of current events, we wanted to delay it. So it's going to be a couple of episodes away, let's just say. Let's see. And Kaishana is here. Thank you for the compliment. And Kaishana expresses that I'm so upset with how people treat others who are slightly different from them. Yes, we're going to definitely be covering that today for sure.
Mhm.
So before we get to diving into our topics, I am going to go over our show's mission statement. We live in a dynamic society where social media shapes us by creating greater opportunities for connection. It has led to a developing understanding of the adversity many marginalized communities face, the powers causing the adversity, and those who act as bystanders as atrocities take place in real time. Our goal with this show is to make connections and have challenging conversations about topics, current events, pop culture, and art. Together, let's weave the threads of understanding with what privilege we have in order to learn, educate, and create in a world that's growing. So, thank you for being here. So, okay. Um, while we're trying to our best to be a bit lighthearted, like it's a very solemn evening because of what's been taking place. Um, on top of the recent swaths of anti-LGBTQ plus legislations across the United States, we've also had the recent, within like the day essentially, invasion of Russia into Ukraine, which has been at the forefront of a lot of people's minds because of the what that represents, the gravity of all of that, and it's very unsettling. So what I mean, when you both heard of it, like what were your reactions or thoughts to it?
The first thing I heard about it was, honestly, I heard an interview somebody did with Donald Trump about it. And he kept using the words like, what a great show of force to bring peace. And I just thought about how messed up that is, right? When you are equating creating a show of force with keeping peace, like that's such an authoritarian thing to say. And that just terrified me because I was like, there are people, he still has the ear of a lot of people. And that just scares me that people are hearing him say that, and that
Mm-hmm.
that will give support to this, you know what I mean, to this, and then to that happening here, you know what I mean, at some point. Like, it just feels like that just opens so many doors when you have somebody who's an American influencer of that kind of weight who is applauding this and putting a good spin on it. It just
a
just
former
scares
a
me.
former president
Mm-hmm.
who, like, and arguably the president is supposed to be like the avatar of patriotism and national pride, saying something like that,
Mm-hmm.
basically glorifying a despot in disguise, let's just say, for
Mm-hmm.
infringing upon the sovereignty of a nation. Like, that's so unsettling to me. And the
Yeah.
fact that there are so many people who agree with them, who are like, oh yeah, I'm just like, that, how is that democratic? Like, that to me,
Right.
that is the exact opposite of democracy in every conceivable way. Ari,
It's
did you want to?
I just think that it's good that he's not president anymore, because I'm afraid that he would have given like financial or physical support to Russia for doing something like that.
Mhm.
And I think Russia really flirted with the idea of doing it during Trump's presidency, because they would have gotten that support that they felt like they needed to help that effort. And what would that have meant for us as a country? Like, if we had given them the support, like, would we have been like part of the axis of evil in this? Like,
Right.
it's just
Right.
so it, like, when you talked about Donald Trump, it's just like my mind started spinning about this alternate history in which he was still president, and I got really
Oh
nervous just now.
Yeah.
my goodness.
And that's just it. It was such a narrow margin that he lost by. Like, it's not unheard of that he or someone like him could be in office again in our lifetimes. You know what I
Right.
mean? And that's terrifying to me, because then, like you said, like, what does that mean when things like this come up and that are clearly going to be on the wrong side of history and clearly on the wrong side of humankind and of, keeping peace and of, peaceful relations? what does that mean, right? Like, like
Mhm.
you said, are we going to end up on the wrong side of that? Are we going to end up one of these axis of evil kind of characters? Kind of, some would argue we already are, for some
Right.
of the things we've done in our past. Some countries would argue that's already true.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just, yeah. So
It's
It's just
very
when we upset the whole global community by taking actions that are extremely unpopular, I feel like the consequences of that will be like immediately felt.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, for sure. So Leo asks, what does Russia even want with Ukraine? And I wanted to answer that question. It probably should be some context here first, especially if a lot of people aren't familiar with the situation. So, um, Ukraine used to be part of the USSR and
Mhm.
gained independence. Was that in the 80s, I think? The late 80s?
89, I think.
I think it was 89. Yeah.
That's when the wall fell, and then it was shortly after that. I don't know specifically about the Ukraine, but it was shortly after that, in the years after that, that these little countries that were the so-called kind of Iron Curtain, this kind of, from Russia
Right.
proper, this kind of buffer zone between Europe and, Eastern Europe and Europe. They started to kind of splinter off and become kind of their own countries. And so,
Mhm.
right, Czechoslovakia is no longer Czechoslovakia, and the Ukraine split off entirely from the USSR, and so has become its own sovereign country. And
Right.
so anyway, yeah. So old person,
No,
kind
no,
of.
no, like, your perspective is so important because, I mean, there are many things that you'll remember that we won't remember or didn't
Mhm.
experience, so I appreciate that a lot. So, what is the cause of this current contention, um, is the fact that Ukraine wanted to join NATO, which is, of course, a coalition of us, the United States and European countries, right? Um, and Russia essentially did not like that.
Western European countries.
Western
Let's make
European
that.
countries specifically, yeah. Um, and like there are people who are like allies to NATO, but not a part of NATO. So I want to distinguish that as well too.
Mhm.
But Russia felt threatened by that, and that was their justification. Well, Putin's justification for taking this action. Unfortunately.
And I mean, I don't want to go down the Vietnam slippery slope communist, row, but I can't, like that was the argument for us going to war against Vietnam, was because, if Vietnam fell to communism, then that could be a slippery slope for, Korea and, everyone else, to fall to communism in the East. And so I don't want to fall down that fallacy, and I don't want to be like, well, if the Ukraine is here, then what's next? But it does raise that question, if the Ukraine is, today, then, and they conquer the Ukraine and reabsorb them into
Mhm.
Russia, like, is
What's
Poland
next?
next? Yeah, is the
Or
former,
Belarus or Moldova or like
mhm,
all of those
Czech
different.
Republic. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
are these places next? I don't think that's unheard of, because I think that's always been in Putin's radar. I think that's
Oh, yeah.
always kind of been one of his goals.
Well, and remember, I think this was back in 2014, there was some, like, shady business happening with the Crimea Peninsula,
Mhm,
in which is in the Black Sea, right? Like, where they occupied that for a
mhm,
long while, so,
mhm.
um, but yeah, like, it's really unsettling. I first saw it I think I was on TikTok. I saw, like, videos of people in Ukraine, like, like, sobbing
Mhm. That's how
over.
I learned about it, was on TikTok. I just happened to open the app last night as I was laying in bed, and there was a video that had over 1 million views or 1 million likes, and it was basically this old woman looking out her window. And in the distance, you can see these bombs slowly coming towards her, and then one
Mm,
hits near her. And it basically, like, she was talking in Ukrainian, and the translation basically was that her water tank had been destroyed in the attack, and that she was worried that like it was gonna. I honestly was afraid that she walked out into the hallway and then walked back into the house. I really expected when she walked back that there was not going to be an apartment there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's
So what I'm most worried about is, does this mean we're going to start another Cold War?
Or another war.
Right.
You know?
It's like, I almost think that it's too early to like, because there's still, like, I know on the political front, like, they are trying to like do sanctions and stuff to see if that's effective and like halting this.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I think that that's a very valid question to have, because if that doesn't work, then what other options would they pursue, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to overview some statistics as of right now. According to NPR, so far, after Russia has attacked multiple locations in Ukraine, there have been 57 Ukrainian fatalities, and over 169 people injured. Additionally, there have been parts of Ukraine that have been taken over right now. The largest airport in Ukraine, in the capital, has been taken over by Russian forces. I just read earlier that Chernobyl has been taken over, which is about, I think, 80 miles away from the capital. The workers apparently have been taken hostage there. And apparently, like, I read some like strategist stuff. Apparently, like, that's like a direct route to the capital, which is why they wanted, like, they kind of viewed that as being a strategic location, or but additionally, like, I mean, while there's like a lot of like atrocities happening in Ukraine right now, like, there's a lot of unsettling things happening in Russia right now as well, because there have been a lot of like, Russian citizens who have been protesting against this incursion, this invasion of Ukraine, and unfortunately, over 1,300 protesters have been arrested or detained for protesting against Putin's decision.
But that's not unheard of, that political descendants of Putin have been arrested and detained, and then they just kind of like disappear, or like they turn up mysteriously dead in custody. It's sort of like, and Putin is definitely a dictator. Like, there's no way around it. He is definitely a dictator in a country that is supposedly having free and fair elections, but there has not been a free and fair election in several years.
Well, he's been, hasn't he been in that position for 22 years now?
Something like that.
Yeah,
And one of his major political opponents that looked like he might unseat him was arrested, and he was, I think he might have turned up dead just recently within the last couple years. But it was like, all of a sudden, because there was so much support for him, that he kind of just like disappeared.
He became a threat, right? So that's really unsettling. A few other bits of information. So NATO has taken some retaliatory action against Russia in the form of sanctions. The United States, for example, has exacted sanctions against Russian banks in an attempt to isolate their economy. And they have put sanctions against the purchase of high-end technology, which means that Russia will not have access to like phone upgrades or trade with relation to any of that. Germany has also suspended the construction of a Russian a pipeline that was being built as like a direct line between Germany and Russia. They've suspended that.
The problem with sanctions that I'm seeing is they can't do too many sanctions, because it'll hurt more countries in Western Europe and the rest of Europe if they do too many sanctions on Russia. So it's kind of like their hands are tied. that's at least what I was reading about it, is that like they are trying to do the best they can with sanctions, but they can't do too much.
Yeah.
Right.
Russia's a lot of people. That's a lot of pocketbooks, that you can tie into, and that's a lot of people to service as well. So that makes sense that.
And
yeah.
It's so, I guess, like, we wanted to talk about it at least for a portion of this episode because it's an ongoing event right now. And I think we need to pass along the fact that Ukraine is seen, that the Russian people who are protesting are seen, that they are not alone. Like we see them. At this point, it's hard to determine what we can do in order to help.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I am hoping that maybe these sanctions might be able to diffuse the situation in some way, because the last thing we need is another substantial war or even a Cold War to happen. So
yeah. Kai Shawana had a question about Americans spying for the Russians, or had a comment just above that one, actually. Learning about how the Americans spied for the Russians. So I'm guessing you're talking about during the Cold War era. There were some spies that were found, but it was actually not as prevalent as it. So the Cold War sparked a paranoia in the United States, and often that ended up being used for political purposes. So see, there's like a lot of problems that come out of this. You have like this big evil bad guy that everybody's afraid of, or that becomes the clear enemy, then that can get weaponized against the population as well. And that ended up being turned into like the McCarthy era. So in the 1950s, there was this guy by the name of McCarthy who was trying to root out spies. It was trying to find people who were communists, and you could get questioned everywhere from Hollywood entertainers on down to just everyday people. You could end up in front of this committee and be asked about everything like your political affiliations, to what clubs did you belong to who your friends were, to try and figure out if you were a Russian spy. Like the fear just went really far, and it really gripped America. And it really brought on this age of ultra conservatism, which is another fear of this, right? Like when we become afraid of our own shadow, it can really have detrimental effects as well. Right, exactly. Kind of, it became a witch hunt for communists. And a lot of times what happened was people got burned who were not communists. You know what I mean? It was just people got, like Kenneth said, I don't think I think that's a very apt equation. It was like a witch hunt where they were looking for this so-called boogeyman, and they just, a lot of people got hurt that weren't actually affiliated in any way with the Communist Party. And Russia wasn't really a true communist country. So even if you were a communist, it didn't mean you were a Russian communist. You know what I mean? It didn't mean necessarily you were the enemy, quote unquote. You might be a Marxist, you might be a communist, but you might still believe in, that's an economic term. You know what I mean? So you might not believe in capitalism, but that doesn't mean you don't believe in democracy. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean you don't believe in, the United States. That just means capitalism isn't your bag. You know what I mean? So a lot of people got raked over the coals too, just for their economic beliefs, and that they, weren't fans of our current economic system. And so it created this deep-seated fear in people of my age and older, particularly, of Russia and communism. And so that's another thing that kind of happens is Putin has this, he's like the Dread Pirate Roberts. Everybody's seen, Princess Bride. He's like the Dread Pirate Roberts, like he's the current president of Russia, but we all know, right, he's really a despot and a dictator. And he has the mantle of these previous dictators kind of hanging over his head. You know what I mean? And so we're always going to be, I think, a little afraid of Russia. And then when they do things like this, right, it can spur that as well. So we also want to make sure, I think, our takeaway from that should be like, we also don't want to become afraid of our own shadow. Like we want to be able to know, what the threat really is and where the threat is coming from, because this can easily be turned against us and be used to subdue the population, which is what happened from the 50s through the 80s. Like I grew up in the Cold War era, in the 70s and 80s. And it was, by the time my consciousness starts, it was kind of normalized to a point that it was like white noise in the background. This nuclear event was probably going to happen at some point, and you just had to ready yourself. It was kind of like school shootings today. This terrible, terrible thing, except school shootings actually happen, but it was this terrible, terrible thing that you had to prepare yourself for, and that you would, probably, happen in your entire lifetime. And it was something we were all kind of afraid of, and it just got so normalized. Now, by that point, rooting out communist sympathizers wasn't an active government program. McCarthyism kind of ran its course because it was what it was, and it was, really terrible. And a lot of people got blackballed in Hollywood, very famously, who weren't at all communist sympathizers. And so eventually people started to realize, oh, you wrote the Magna Carta and you are really the Inquisitor. Mm-hmm. Check. You know what I mean? Like, gotcha. Like, we started to eat our own tail, as it were. So, that part did get, kind of truncated, but history being history, that's not to say that it couldn't happen over again. So that's another fear. Like, if the Cold War comes back, then are we going to deal with another age of McCarthyism? And we already have these dictator, authoritarian like leaders in power, like Trump, like some of the governors, like a lot of the legislators that are all for authoritarian governments. Mm-hmm. It would be very easy for one of them to come in with a message of, we're going to be powerful, we're going to not put up with this, we're going to be strong, and for people to cower behind that and say, yes, please protect us.
Yeah, it's all fear mongering at the end of the day.
Yeah, America's always wanted a king. As much as we deny it, we have always wanted a king.
So to bridge the gap between Russia and our main topic tonight, in Russia, they did criminalize being LGBTQ+, and people have been put into prison because they were of a marginalized group, and that they try to like really keep that like gender binary because they or that like cisgender binary. So it's like there's a lot of fear of actually being who you are and being authentic in yourself, because it does have actual consequences of you could be jailed for that. And so that's what I'm really afraid of for our country, is that like there's all this legislation being thrown around, and it's like it's sort of like the abortion ban that happened in Texas. It's like they're slowly whittling away at these things that have been kind of generally accepted before. And now they're like, well, we really don't accept those things. We want to take those away from you.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like, I keep thinking, like, as people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and has passed away, and as like Bernie Sanders is getting elderly, who is the next generation that's going to pick up that mantle, right? Mm-hmm. Who are the next people that are going to fight that good fight?
Right.
Name them.
Name
the Gen Xers that are in politics.
Ocasio-Cortez.
There's one.
I don't know.
Have to replace all, you know what I mean? This entire generation of people who fought, and so a lot is said about baby boomers, but I want you to also think about, these were the people that fought in the civil rights movement. These are the people that marched in the Women's March. These are the people that were at Stonewall. I almost said Stonehenge. These are the people that, God damn it, Brandy. She's a fickle mistress. But these are the people that marched in these marches. These are the people that made that change. Harvey Milk was a baby boomer. We have to keep that in mind.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But really, the problem is like, do we have a whole lot of millennials being represented right now? I feel like it's like older generations that are still in power and that have been like clinging to this power for quite a while, and that like there's not a whole lot of turnover with, say, my generation yet being voted into office.
Yeah, well, that's going to start in the local level, right? So it starts in the local level, and then you work your way up. You don't start at president, right? Very few. You don't Very few people would, right? You start in the local level and you work your way up. So if you look in the local areas, you'll see younger people running for office and younger people having office, because that's how a career in politics works. And then eventually you get up into the higher echelons of power. And I know I'm going to say a very unpopular thing here, but we want those older politicians in power because they are the ones with the experience. They are the ones who have built up over the course of their career these relationships with other lifetime politicians. And so they're the ones that can bridge the gap. They're the ones that can make these decisions. Look, younger people can yell and scream and be passionate about things, that's fine. But Bernie Sanders has been on the front line and has worked with these people and has shaken hands across the aisle and has made relationships where he can affect change in a real way. Does that make sense? Where it's harder when you're younger and you don't have that long reputation. That's true in any job, right?
Well,
like
yeah,
the older you get and the more experienced you get, the more agency you have and the more change you can make. So I know it's a very unpopular opinion right now, but
just because there's a lot of polarization in our country, because we have people who want things like these trans bills to go away and to give trans rights, and then you have a group of people, or a large number of basically half, saying that they want these bills to pass. And so there's a lot of like back and forth, and it really happened like pre-Trump into Trump era, that there was just this major polarization that happened.
This has been happening since Ronald Reagan. I will maintain that until the day I die. This has been happening since the Reagan years.
Well, see, going back to what you were saying, like, I think you made some excellent points, Sherri. The only issue is that many of the seasoned politicians who know how to get things done, who have these connections, are just simply not open to social change. Whereas there are a lot, though, like Bernie Sanders, though, who have been at the helm of that. Like, I think there's a large swath who are at the helm of that, but then there's also an equally large swath of people who are like just very like stick to our values, and our values exclude other groups of people type of
But
thing.
is that a generational thing, or is that just that's how people are thing? You know what I mean? You're going to find that as an intergenerational problem.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? So I get annoyed being in the middle generation, seeing the millennials and the boomers fight each other all the time. It's like, you guys don't understand. You're the same generation. You're just separated.
And I wasn't trying to imply that it was a generation.
So that's my only argument. Like, I'm not going to say that the individuals probably don't need to, be voted out and move along. Sure, absolutely. That's why we have a voting process, right? Vote them out, find someone better, and, vote them out and move them along. Absolutely. I'm just saying, when people polarize this and turn it into a generational problem, then we've missed so many other opportunities, right? Like, you think of other countries where, older generations, you refer to them, even if they're not your family, you refer to them as auntie and uncle, right? That's a respectful term, because these are people with knowledge that you don't have. Whether that knowledge pertains to you, whether that knowledge is your truth or not, isn't the issue. The issue is that they have knowledge and experience that you can learn from in one way or another. You can either take it on and be like, wow, that was really useful, or you can say, okay, I've learned to go in the other direction from this. But it's still important knowledge, and we lose that intergenerational, because the younger people have something that we can learn too. And with all the infighting that we get, this is a whole different episode. I've totally derailed us. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. We'll circulate back here in a few.
Yeah, but I just feel like it's it's this whole, when we have this intergenerational fighting, we're missing out on the pearls of wisdom, because young people have all the vigor and all the life and all of the possibilities, right? Are full of possibilities and full of new ideas. We lose that. And older generations have all the wisdom, right? Like, this is where we learn the mistakes that we've made in the past, is from listening to our elders. And so without both of those perspectives, we're just going to be stuck in this quagmire forever.
Oh yeah, I agree completely. And yeah, like what I was saying, I wasn't trying to suggest that it was like a generational conflict necessarily. I'm suggesting that, like, political experience, like, any person, no matter what age, can have political experience. And there have just been groups of people with that experience who have been on a specific trajectory where they've been shaped by certain echo chambers, let's just say, right? And it's those that have been overpowering specifically.
So this has literally never happened anytime I've ever streamed, but I have to use the restroom so bad I'm going to die. So I'm going to remove myself. I'll be right back, okay?
Go to the bathroom. We will continue the chat.
That's a thing. I'm allowed to do that. I thought I was going to burst last week.
Yes, you are allowed to do that. Though this is our first time in our history of the show where it's happened, and I love it.
I'm glad I'm not the one that popped that seal.
Right. I'm surprised I haven't.
I'm already the new kid. I don't need to be totally the weird new kid. I already feel like I'm counterpoint.
We are all weird though. Like, no, I don't think you're like counterpoint necessarily. You bring up different perspectives, which I think is what we need to explore, right? And that's significant because that's how we learn new things, right?
That's how we all learn and grow. I mean, I've learned so much from you two in our conversations. You've really made me think too and see other perspectives and think of my answers in a more nuanced way, which I really appreciate.
Same here for me too. And I really appreciate that. So while Ari's going to the bathroom, we will circulate things back to talking about the other major topic that's taking place right now.
Perfect timing.
So
perfect timing.
So we wanted to talk about, again, and we've talked about this in a few other episodes, the attacks on the LGBTQ plus community that have been happening legislatively across our country. We, a few episodes ago, talked about Florida. We briefly in that episode talked about Arizona. And tonight we want to talk about a certain new thing that's happened in Texas, which has been very unsettling. So I'm going to summarize what this event was. And this is quoted from a CBS article. Governor Greg Abbott ordered the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services to investigate any reported instances of children undergoing, quote unquote, abusive gender transitioning procedures. And the announcement comes days after the state's attorney general said that state law characterizes those procedures as child abuse.
And the procedures they're talking about, okay.
So I have an article from The Nation that summarizes my thoughts about the treatment. If you don't mind me reading this really quick, it's about a paragraph.
No, go for it.
Go for it.
Treatment for gender dysphoria in adolescence involves almost exclusively non-surgical interventions that don't begin until puberty and only were medically necessary with informed consent from both parents and the minor patient. The conversation over this care would suggest that thousands of pubertal, sorry, that's a really hard word to say, children are being rushed into surgery, but no children are getting medical treatment for gender dysphoria at all. All this care is not new, experimental, or unsafe. It is supported by every major medical association in the United States, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, and the American Psychological Association, and the Endocrine Society. Access to this care can be transformative for young people with dysphoria.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sums up pretty much what I was going to say pretty succinctly. Like, if you read it, and I've read it, if you read the letters and everything that's what's going on, it literally says, giving surgery to children under the age of 18 is mutilating their bodies and taking away their right to procreation. Okay. But taking away their, like, I have a whole, don't even.
Basically, the whole idea about gender dysphoria and transness, the pushback against it is very much a white supremacist view that goes all the way back to World War II.
Yeah. Well, let me finish what I was saying. So that already is gross. And then they're talking about, like you said, talking about surgery for children, which literally almost never happens. If it does happen, which they acknowledge in the letters and in the laws that they're talking about here, the bill, I should say, they do acknowledge that gender reassignment surgery is medically necessary if there is or can be medically necessary if there's not a clear cut,
Intersex.
If it's someone that's intersexed, or there's not clear, if the alleles aren't lining up, because you can have all kinds of different presentations, XY and XX, it can happen all kinds of different ways, right? So,
but it should be acknowledged that intersex is a lot different than transness, and that transness is you were assigned a certain gender at birth, or a certain sex, and then you go through either a physical or other transformative changes that make you into the other sex.
Right, and they are. And again, and we're doing the same thing, conflating sex with gender. You know what I mean? Like, and they're doing this through the whole letters, through the whole bill. They're conflating sex with gender. Mm-hmm. So absolutely, they're conflating intersex with transness, and they're conflating sex with gender, which are two completely different things on both levels. And then just the fact, and and you've interrupted me 3 times now, and I think I've lost my point.
Oh no.
I'm so sorry. I don't mean to interrupt. I just get all these ideas and I get really fired up about it. I'm so sorry, Sherri. Please forgive me.
It's okay. I guess it must have been a lie.
We've all interrupted many times. It's okay. It's part of our charm, right?
Yeah.
It's not charming.
Because I
really wanted to say
I do it sometimes too.
I've been waiting this whole time to say this. Now it's gone.
Well, if it comes back to you, just like flag us down and be like, it's back.
Okay.
And then
I won't. But okay.
We were talking about white supremacy.
No, you were talking about white supremacy.
I was talking about white supremacy.
Well, you were talking about like the designations of.
No.
Not at all where I was going with that, because that was also something Ari brought up and then all completely derailed me. So,
do you want to talk about Utah?
Not really, because it's kind of a done deal. Like, I mean, just in the maybe broader sense that Texas is not alone. You know what I mean? Like, these laws and these issues are being brought up in other states. And as we were saying before, like it's like the clock being ticked back. Like we talked about before with the whole, what was it with the whole, don't, in Florida, right? Like, don't say gay, basically, right? I don't say gay, right? It's like, don't ask, don't tell from the 90s, right? It's like, it's just horrifying how things are being ticked back. And I mean, and I get it, like progressiveness is, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, but it's just frustrating to watch it happen in real time. Especially when it feels like 5 steps back.
Or 10 steps back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We're going back far.
Which is how we're definitely feeling with how things have been happening lately. So a big question after hearing Governor Abbott say what he said and ordering the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services to investigate, how does this affect different groups of people, right? So obviously this affects the children drastically. Like in his view, the goal of this order is to protect children from child abuse, when really you are putting them in harm's way by potentially having their parents taken away from them for simply being supportive of their identity, right? Mm-hmm. But this, like, they could literally face legal ramifications. Teachers, doctors, counselors, if they do not report information related to something that, a child might say to them, so on and so forth, they could also face legal ramifications. And I was also reading in one of the articles that even the public, if they know that a child is going through gender-affirming therapies or anything like that, that they could also be subject to legal ramifications, which is really scary. Like, I think that's like scary.
Shut up. I know what I was going to say.
For it.
Sorry, you interrupt me again and I'm stabbing you in the forehead. All right, here we go. What I was going to say was, so that the typical way that that children are handled is they're given puberty blockers. Puberty blockers, all they do is they literally stop the puberty process. And that is so important for a child going through gender dysmorphia, because there are physical changes that happen to your body during puberty that are almost impossible to undo if they happen. And so blocking those changes from happening, delaying it, it's literally all you're doing. You're just delaying puberty until that child feels, okay, nope, you know what, I'm good. So let's just let nature run its course. Or, you know what, this was the right choice to make. Let's, continue on another road, right? Like until they come of age and they're able to make that choice, it just delays that process for them. It literally, that's all it does. Oh my God, that's all I wanted to get out.
Do you feel better?
But it's like, it just makes me so angry that they keep saying, well, all the surgery. Who are the children that are getting the surgery? I know full ass grown adults in their 60s who can't get the surgery because it's such a long, convoluted process. How are children who are 8, 9 years old, right, getting? It's not a thing. It's not a thing. It's a boogeyman that they've invented so that they can be bigoted.
Well, and yeah, it's all because they already subliminally acknowledge that people in the LGBTQ plus community are monsters to them. They literally act like that children are going to be mutilated, and that's not at all the case whatsoever. I'm glad that you mentioned that.
And I'm done. All right, we can be friends again.
I was going to mention puberty blockers too. I was like, I'm just going to let Sherri talk about this. I don't want to be rude.
Oh my goodness. Sometimes we just need a laugh, right? Considering everything that's going on.
Well, it's just such a tense situation, and it just, and and I have friends and I have family that live in Texas, and so this is affecting people I know, and it's so frustrating because, like Texas and Florida both are already such a hot mess in so many ways, politically and socially. Yeah,
they blue screen,
right?
It's true.
So true.
So yeah, and for me as a non-binary person, I passed as femme, but I've talked about this in videos on my channel. I have this fear of shifting towards male or that androgyny and like not really being able to pass anymore, that I get out of that territory in which I pass as a femme into that territory of where I'm actually non-binary, like not actually non-binary, but I'm more androgynous or male presenting. And I'm afraid to do that. I've been afraid to do that because one, I'm worried about how my family and the people around me will treat me. But two, I'm also afraid of kickback of there being like consequences to my life and well-being because of shifting, that if I don't pass anymore, am I going to be up to the scrutiny of people who are against that and want to, do some physical harm to people who are not passing anymore?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Like it makes you a big target and it shouldn't, right? Like this is literally something that is nobody else's business. This is literally the one thing you should have control over is your own goddamn body, and how your body presents to the world. If you're not in control of anything else, that's the one thing you should be in control of. And it's literally the one thing they're trying to legislate. The same people who will be like, oh, but no mask mandates, right? Because bodily autonomy.
Yeah, where are they during the trans argument that trans people are valid?
Sherri, you're going to get us off on a tangent on that.
That's a whole other soapbox.
That's a whole nother can of worms.
It's a whole nother can of worms. Like, abortion? Nope, we got to manage that. We got to manage women's bodies. Nope, we got to manage trans bodies. Oh, but
But the moment you have to wear a piece of cloth on your face to protect people, oh, what an atrocity! Oh my goodness. Oh, that angers me. Right, Arpy. They are saying, with people like that saying you're a body, you're a choice, yet they are more than willing to dictate other people's bodies and choices to them. Oh,
to me, this all runs in the same vein as you have like the NRA, like you can't take my guns away unless it's a black person, and then they'll get shot by the police for even showing a gun or having a gun that they've legally acquired.
Like, think about how messed up this is, right? Like, you can have a gun for personal protection. So I'm at home in my bed with my gun under my bed, personal protection. It's licensed. I'm legal to have it. Cops can break into my house, run into my room. I pull out my gun to protect myself. I'm the criminal. Right?
Right.
Like, you know, with no-knock warrants and all that shit where they can just like rush in because they thought they saw somebody walk by with a crack pipe in 1985. You know, like, what the hell? Like, literally, they don't need hardly any excuse and they can just break into your house. And of course, whose houses do they break into more often than not? But people of color, right? We're people and people of color. And unfortunately, that Venn diagram overlaps way too much.
And that's a whole nother topic. I'm just
whole nother.
Wait, okay, so overall, there's a lot going on, and I think that
we're gonna buy an island and have our own commune. Who's in?
Actually, I'm at the point where I would prefer like another planet, like just a planet.
Word.
So okay. So we've talked about how this would impact the different groups of people that I mentioned earlier, but this also impacts the transgender community in the sense that it is very isolating for individuals in the community, especially individuals who may not have support networks. They could potentially be displaced, lose homes. So many, they could be harassed, abused, so many different things that could happen to them. So, was somebody going to mention something?
Oh,
no. I heard an inhale.
I was just laughing because there are several people who said, "I'll join."
Yeah.
Oh.
Just full disclosure. If I start a commune, it's probably going to turn into a sex cult. So just everybody be aware. Everybody be aware that that's where that's going to go. I mean, I'm transparent. What? Lonnie's laughing because he knows it's true.
It's so true. I've been in our group chats on Saturday, and it definitely is true.
100% going to turn into a sex cult. Yeah. That's why Ken has 3 exclamation points, because he knows it's true too.
3 exclamation. Oh my goodness.
I love it so
look what Panda said.
I saw that in the pamphlet already.
Oh, you helped me write the pamphlet. What are you talking about? I need that laugh.
I did too. So we have like several minutes left. So let's focus on things that we can do, you know, to try to help remedy this horrible atrocity that's taking place. So what can we do to help transgender youth in Texas? There is a website that you can go to. It's called www.texastranskids.org. It's TX and then transkids.org. There are a lot of very useful resources there where you can be directed toward places where you could like donate, places where you can volunteer to be an advocate, to, you know, do mailers, talk to politicians, so on and so forth. There's many different things that you can do. Obviously, for many, that might seem imposing, especially if you don't live in Texas. So here are a few other things that you could do as well. I think that it would be important to encourage citizens in Texas to call their representatives and senators to speak out on this.
I'm going to call my sister or text my sister and be like, are you going to do something about this bill? Because my sister is a school teacher in Texas, and this directly affects her because students might come to her and try to disclose that they're trans, and she has to tell on them.
They also had a gubernatorial vote. Vote him out. Get Abbott out of there.
Yep. That was one of the next ones that I have, like vote out Abbott and vote out any other anti-LGBTQ plus legislators, because there are people in the Senate and the House there that do support his efforts, unfortunately.
My mom told me she voted him out today.
Good.
She did her part.
Good. So additionally, I think one thing that we can do on our local end here, because obviously we have seen this or other anti-LGBTQ plus bits of legislation happening in other states. I think it would be important for us to call our own senators and representatives, not only on the federal level, but the state level, in order to have conversations about this topic, like, and to establish that constituents do not want policies or legislation that would, you know,
But
dictate.
the point of that too, when you contact your representatives, it sets up this baseline of they don't want to upset their constituency, so maybe they'll start passing bills on the federal level that affect the local and state level. That if they pass a bill that says trans people are allowed to exist without any fear of reprisal legally, then, like giving that umbrella protection, we can do that on the federal level.
And that's what I think we need. I think we need some federal sanctions. I think we need some laws on the books that states can't override.
Or not easily override.
Right.
Right. And I think go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say that way it goes to court and the court shuts it down and they just look like the jerks they are,
100%. Yeah. And I think this all comes back down to education too. Granted, with these bits of legislation, it puts education and educators in a very precarious situation. But at the end of the day, education and having conversations about LGBTQ plus history is what helps undo these types of mindsets that lead to these horrible bits of legislation. Ari,
right, the problem with that is you have the Don't Say Gay bill also being talked about, where they remove that ability to have conversations about stuff from the table, so you can't even discuss it. So it's sort of like an extra invalidation of some kind, that like, because you can't talk about it, you can't educate people, and you can't get that baseline to change the laws.
Yeah. But it's also like having these conversations is important, like, and being open to these kinds of conversations
before it's taken away.
And as simple a gesture as us having our pronouns up on the screen. That is a statement. That is an education. That is an acknowledgement, right?
Yeah, and it normalizes the significance of that acknowledgement, right?
Right. I'm in a heteronormative relationship. I still refer to my partner as my partner, not my boyfriend, not my, anything gendered, right? He's my partner. To normalize that phrase, to normalize that word. Also, I'm 50 and boyfriend feels weird, but
Oh my goodness. During this difficult time, I think it's also very important for everyone to consider their own mental health as well. Like, we have, invasions happening in countries, we have legislation happening in states that are like oppressing entire groups of people. If this becomes too much for you, like, it's important to care about your own mental well-being. Reach out, do what you need to do, be creative, make us, if you are able to, develop a supportive network for yourself that can keep you in a good place, and I think at the end of the day, remembering that you're not alone is so unbelievably important. Do either of you have any other advice for these difficult times?
You go ahead and share.
Oh no, I was just going to echo what you said, Donny.
So Ari's like,
sorry, Ari. I know.
I'm so sorry. To be so thoughtful. I got a complex now.
No, I was just going to echo what you said, Donny. Like, I think that's probably the one thing I really learned from the LGBTQIA community growing up, was that it's more about your chosen family than your birth family. Your birth, some that can overlap. There might be some people that you are blood relatives with that are in your chosen family, but you choose that. Don't go off of, some weird stigma of blood is thicker than water, any old phrase like that, right? You choose your family, you choose your tribe, you choose your people, and you choose your that will build you up and that will help support you. Don't feel like you're alone, and isolate yourself with these people who are just going to continually traumatize you. You know, if that well is dry, stop trying to draw water out of it.
Yep, 100%.
So I believe that most people, if not all people, should have someone they can talk to on a professional level. That's why I support Medicare for all, because the one thing I love about Medicare is that it helps you get mental health professionals who will help you in some official capacity. And I feel like most people would benefit from therapy. There are very few people that I think do not need therapy or do not need to talk to somebody. But if you struggle with mental health issues, talking to a professional who can be objective and help you work through these issues is so incredibly important too.
Agreed. Could not. Well said,
Yes.
Ari. Well said. You know, your friends can only do so much. It's not fair to expect them to be your mental health, you know, entirely they're there to support you, but they can't be, you know, everything. Seek a professional when you can. Do what you can to get some kind of insurance. And there's a lot of therapists out there that will take payment plans and will work with you if you are in poverty or you can't afford a lot. So you can go to Psychology Today's website, and they have a search engine where you can search by your area and by what insurance you have or what your needs are or whatever. So I found a therapist in way downstate in I can't think of it, down into the Detroit area anyway. And we do telehealth, you know, every month or every week. And, you know, so we talk over computer and she helps me a lot. She's kink friendly. She's LGBTQIA friendly. She's, you know, younger. She's very open to a lot of different ideas. Just a lot of different modalities that meet up with my modalities. You know, find somebody that you feel comfortable with and you don't have to explain yourself to, or you don't have to explain to them what this means. Find somebody who will meet you where you are.
Yep.
Also this. I was going to say that, but I couldn't remember the exact phrase.
True.
So.
Yep. Well, my friends, I think this is a good point to close out the night. But again, thank you for being here to listen with us. We hope that in some way during these difficult times, gathering here to have these conversations might be an escape for all of you, as it is for us. Just remember that we love you and that we will talk to you very soon. Have a good night,
next
everyone.
time Ari won't talk so much.
No, talk all the things. We need comedy. Come on.
I think a lot of it is that we just get so heated, you know, and then we kind of talk over each other. Oh, well, it's entertaining. Good. If it's entertaining for you guys, it's entertaining for us. Okay, I'm done. Love you guys.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye.